So many Christians that I know right now, seriously, are watching Allie, they're watching Fearless, they're watching Steve Deace for their shepherding, because these are the Christians actually speaking into the culture and helping them work through life, because their pastor won't do it.
I'm blaming Christians for the gay sexual revolution we're witnessing. They're just mirroring our behavior. What say you?
I go back to pastors. You and I spend a lot of time discussing how pastors have failed us, because pastors have failed the people they're shepherding, and the people they're shepherding are the ones out there who are refusing to speak, right? If the person leading you is not going to speak on this, why are you going to speak on it to the sinners? If anybody should be hearing about it, it should be the Christians from the pastors and the leaders. And we refuse to do that. I don't know that there's a cultural rot occurring right now that Christians do not deserve some responsibility for, because it's all written in the book, right? We know what the right answers are. We know what the proper values are. And pastors have spent so much, 60 years avoiding these topics because of the idea of separation in church and state, or their 501c3, or what I think is a, you can ask Pastor Bobby and Anthony about this, but I think it's a missed perception of Matthew 7, where people say, basically, who am I to judge? Well, you're not the judge. God is. You're just telling them what he said. And so people get this idea that they can hide behind that. And they say, well, if I judge you, then God will judge me, and I don't want God to judge me, so you can do whatever you want. It's a stupid misinterpretation. It's the coward's way out instead of telling the truth. So I think pastors have hidden behind Matthew 7. I think a lot of Christians have hidden behind Matthew 7. That's why they don't vote their values, right? So to me, it is ultimately a pastor's fault. This is what I was telling Allie Beth Stuckey when I was on with her. So many Christians that I know right now, seriously, are watching Allie, they're watching Fearless, they're watching Steve Deace for their shepherding, because these are the Christians actually speaking into the culture and helping them work through life, because their pastor won't do it. I've had probably 10 or 15 messages from a lot of the girls on Allie's show telling me that they left their church for the same reasons I did, and they're dying for somebody to help them work through this culture, and nobody's helping them do it, right? So I think the pastors have failed to speak against this, which allowed the non-Christians, and certainly some Christians, but I don't know that Christians were leading the way in the sexual revolution. I think Christians didn't stand in the way, which was the big problem, right? There's an idea in the Bible, in Matthew 5:9, it said, "Blessed are the peacemakers, for they will be called children of God." And pastors instead have become peacekeepers. And the idea of peacekeepers is avoiding conflict, right? It is saying, again, in Matthew 7, you'd be saying, well, I don't want to be judged. I won't stand in the way. We're kind of a seeker's church. Why don't you just, don't tell them what they're doing wrong. Just tell them about the gospel. It's all about the gospel. The gospel obviously is the center. But part of being a peacemaker is initiating conflict, because what happens is Christians never ever meet anybody where the sins are then. And I think that's very problematic. The strategy is always avoidance, and the avoidance is out of fear. You can't operate out of fear. Eventually that conflict is coming to a head. It's happening right now, right? All of this peacekeeping, it's happening right now as they're trying to take over our children and have drag shows with our kids. That's the issue. Eventually, peacekeepers do have to fight that battle. Peacemakers initiate the battle early and say, here's where we stand, here's where you stand, now let's work this out. We will never, ever celebrate this depraved behavior. But you guys can do what you want. We're going to do what we need to over here. We will speak against this because this is what we believe. We've never even had that conversation. It's always a handoff. Maybe someday they'll get saved.
Look, I think that pastors, like a lot of people, and particularly men, want to protect their success, their popularity, or whatever. And so, a pastor can't stand firm on the LGBT issues when he overlooked all the things going on in the heterosexual movement, community, or whatever. And so if you haven't said a word about, hey man, our kids black and white, all across the country, are listening to a music called hip hop that has sexualized everything and has promoted a level of depravity and violence that is unbelievable. And ministers and men and Christians, in order to protect the popularity, we said nothing. And I'm throwing the we in there, although I've been very consistent about hip hop and, you know, what's wrong with it and how polluted it is. And I've been on that for 30 years. But I'm going to put we in there because I listened to the music. I was highly critical of it, but I certainly listened to it, knew it, went to nightclubs that played it, danced to it, the whole 9 yards. But once you overlook all of that, and once you've mainstreamed all of that, the LGBT guys have a right to say, you done overlooked all of this other stuff. Why are you picking on me? You co-sign out of pop. And so eventually, we're not there yet, because when the rap thing first started, there were people that said something, and then they just gave in and just went along to get along. But eventually, ministers will embrace Lil Nas X and everything he's rapping about, and because that'll be necessary to protect their popularity. And so I certainly think pastors deserve some blame and rebuke here, but just men in general. We haven't protected women and we haven't protected kids, and we're getting the culture we deserve.